Please welcome Felix Martin.
Welcome. Sovereignty is the next wave of cloud transformation. Gartner is predicting that 70% of enterprises outside US will have a digital sovereignty strategy followed by a sovereign cloud adoption. We know also by all the reports that near 36% of AI workloads will have sovereign requirements. But more than that is organizations and governments in particular, they are dedicating more than 50% of their sovereign infrastructure to run and execute AI workloads. So in today's world, data and infrastructure are power. And based on that, digital sovereignty is not anymore an option, right, or a debate, a policy debate is more like something, a critical business mandate. So today, and welcome again, we are going to go through this topic. Please look at this typical disclaimer on product solutions, and also please at the end, don't forget just to complete your survey. That will help us to improve this type of sessions. Let me just introduce, right, speakers today. So this is a combination of 3 different roles that will introduce, right, the topics from different perspectives. So we have Colin Taylor, is our HPE Senior Distinguished Technologist Cloud Architect, who will helping us to explain our HPE portfolio, and he will be sharing also discussions with customers about this sovereign topic. He is engaged with customers every day, so I think it's a good, he can reach highly right this discussion. But also today, we have a guest, and a special guest is one of our partners, is Jens Ploxtis. He is a managing director of one of our partners, Secunet. Secunet is a service provider in Germany. And he will be sharing, right, how they are facing with these sovereign challenges. More than that, he will be sharing with us practical, right, how they are building sovereign solutions for their customers, right? Basically, right, I forgot myself, right? I'm the cybersecurity transformation services lead, part of the advisory and professional service organization, and my role here is that basically to introduce the topic. And also, I will be sharing also with you what we identify as the most important tracks that you may have into consideration when you are building a strategy for approaching this sovereign cloud transformation. So let's start with this map, right? So sovereignty is not a regional trend, it's a global movement. Right? So in this global movement, we know, and I don't need to elaborate too much on that because you understand the context of this geopolitical climate and this geopolitical context, as governments basically are defining strict data residency regulations and laws. Right? Not specifically, right, for what we call sovereignty. So you will not find, or will be very difficult to find globally, right, schemas or regulations that are specifically talking about sovereignty. This is like a merge of different sovereignty requirements across different type of regulations. Privacy, critical infrastructure regulations like NIS2 in Europe, DORA. We can find sovereignty requirements in cloud regulations, Second Cloud in France, or C5 in Germany. Also, probably you know that we have in Europe this EUCS, that is a schema for cloud, but we know the situation, right? This is under development and under discussions, lobbies, very difficult to close, right? We are not expecting probably to close this even in the next few years. But this is a written debate, right? EU is probably leading and trying just to came up with that. But if you see, we cannot find, right, a global sovereignty-specific schema or regulatory compliance that we can use as an example, right? So every industry, every geography, they are conforming their own kind of regulatory compliance with, small pieces of sovereignty or elements or principles or requirements that are coming across these different regulations. So one of the things that the governments have identified is basically they need to protect the national economy. They need to protect citizens. They need to protect national security. And because of that, they are coming with these data residency regulations and laws that basically forces organizations to maintain the data in the border of the jurisdictional limits or the geography, right? So the data needs to be managed and to be inside of those borders and the border of the jurisdiction. So what is important, right, is just to think that it's not only about protecting the data and the citizens and the economy. Governments has also realized that this is a way to manage and to guide the foreign investments. So there is, and we can see, right, examples of how the industry is moving because of this new transformation wave. As obviously, when we are forcing to maintain the data under the boundaries, right, of one specific geography, obviously, we need to build data centers. We need to build services in that geography. We need to put people working on that because we will see now what is the definition, right, of sovereignty. So governments are using this also sovereignty concept also to reinforce their economies and to guide, right, the investments of the cloud industry. That's why probably we are not able to close this EU Cloud Act, right? Because there are so many forces and economic interests that are not allowing to just to close this. And by the way, right, I don't know if you're aware, but 3 weeks ago, EU have released a new sovereign framework for organizations who are trading with EU government. And this is nice because, right, it's kind of strange because they are trying to benchmark or to score, right, what is the sovereignty level, right, of an organization who is trading again with the governments, which I think is, okay, I don't know if this is fair or not, but obviously is pushing, right, the industry across. Let's start also just for the audience, just to be everyone in the same page to explain what is digital sovereignty, right? And then I will pass through the next section to lead, right, and to deep right into the concept. But when we talk about digital sovereignty, we are talking about cloud services or resources which are exclusively owned, controlled, and operated until the boundaries of a geography, right, and the border, right, of a same jurisdiction, independently of where the data is, right? So at the end, Gartner defines, right, these three principles, which is important because when we talk about sovereignty, this will help to understand exactly what we mean by sovereignty, right? How we can land right into something specific, something we can touch. Obviously, sovereignty is about that, right? Is to have something under these borders, but we have three concepts, which is data sovereignty, which is about the data itself, the most important element, right? And something that we need to protect. To have control and to have visibility, what is the data, to have, to understand or to have control on who is accessing this information, and also to avoid that someone else can access that data without our permission. And we are aware about this US Act, which is forcing hyperscalers, right? And we have some of this is coming, this sovereign transformation is coming on this start, right? US Act was forcing to provide the data to hyperscalers, even from customers in Europe, because of this Cloud Act, right? So data sovereignty is really important. The second one is technological sovereignty. When we talk about technological sovereignty, we talk about the ownership of of the infrastructure? Who is owner of the infrastructure? Who is controlling the IT infrastructure that I'm using for implementing the full stack? And the third element that conforms these sovereignty principles are the operational sovereignty. When we talk about operational sovereignty, we are talking about who is designing and maintaining the platform, right? And we know, and that is changing the industry, not only the cloud, right? The industry has moved from 20 years ago trying just to move all the delivery of the, let's say, support and maintenance of the platforms to offshore, right? And we know a lot of movements to India, to cheap, let's say, resources, or to reduce the cost of these type of services. But now, this type of regulations, or this trend, or this massive transformation is forcing to come back again to move those, let's say, resources, maintenance to under the borders and the limits, right, of these sovereign requirements. So people maintaining and this infrastructure will require probably security clearance, right? And by governments or defense, and obviously people who is, and again, under the limits of the sovereignty border. Who is consuming sovereignty? I will classify 3 groups, right? Primarily 2 groups. The first group is early adopters who are adopting this technology. Governments, defense, primarily. But they are not now, right? They are doing this time ago. They started working on this sovereign concept, right? Obviously, defense, because security is their business, but also governments who are forcing this regulatory landscape. They are moving right to this transformation journey, and they are in a, let's say, mature state. But followers, which is the second group, are the highly regulated markets. And this is happening. And even if it's not today, they are, again, I will also now name the initial reference about the 70% of organizations will move to this sovereign concept, right? It's a wave, a transformational wave. So regulated markets, telco, finance, critical infrastructures, telco, manufacturing are coming. But also in this ecosystem, the third player are service providers. They are not consuming, but they are building services, cloud services. And regional service providers realize that this sovereign concept can help them to compete with hyperscalers, right? In fact, hyperscalers are reaching agreements with many local players, local service providers, to build solutions, sovereign cloud solutions, that the industry, in fact, right, the conclusion is industry is moving. You know, the ecosystem, customers, service providers, technology vendors like HP, we are moving fast, right, in this history. So now is how customers are adopting this type of this transformation and technology. So I will finalize with this before inviting our special guest, right, and lead more into the details on how we can help from HP to support this specific journey. And I would like just to finalize based on my own experience. As a consultant, advisory, we have identified like 4 key tracks that are interconnected, that can help or should be taken into consideration when we are building a sovereign strategy that will help to be compliant with the regulations, and at the same time to create like a strategy that can help to scale and to protect, right, the information that we are building, right? Because at the end, it's not only compliance. We want to be sure that the data we are putting in this type of infrastructure is really protected. The first track that we identify is the security and risk management. Organizations, and again, this is, you know, a reference to the map of the complexity of the regulations. Every organization needs to identify which are their sovereign requirements. To do that, they need to do a profiling of the organization itself, to identify what is the target infrastructure architecture that we are going to deploy, what is the data that I'm going to move to this sovereign concept. Apart from the profiling will help to identify what is the level of assurance. The level of assurance, I mean, to identify what are the requirements, right? Because, I mean, even if the industry is there, I need to identify exactly what I mean by sovereignty. I want to bring the infrastructure, I want to own the infrastructure, I want to manage the infrastructure. Maybe the market is not ready, I'm not ready, so I need to identify exactly what are the requirements. And for doing that, the only way to do that is to implement a management system and to be compliant with the regulations, right? This track will identify the requirements for identifying the requirements that will help to design the technological controls that can help to implement at the architectural level, right, the sovereign infrastructure. The second track is what we call sovereign-ready infrastructure. At the end, we don't need to forget that when we are building a sovereign cloud, we are talking about cloud. So cloud means to design a full stack. And we understand that, right? We are mature. But now, the properties that we need to build with sovereign is like multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, private cloud, right? Under a control environment. So that is the transformation. We need to move from the standard public cloud provided by the hyperscalers to a controlled, trusted, and sovereign cloud. That means that we need to evaluate, right, where our workloads will be provided. We need to design the full stack according to the requirements that are defined by the first track, by the security and risk management track. The third track is about what we call sovereign data foundation. This foundational track is, and you see, is pretty aligned with one of the principles. We have identified this as a quick win. So, because when we are building a cloud infrastructure for sovereignty, if we focus on the data and we protect the data, and we are able to manage the security of that data, sometimes we can even forget the infrastructure. Right? There will be another requirements at the infrastructure level for sovereignty, but at least we are protecting the data. And the good thing is that if we protect the data, we can still think on implementing kind of level of sovereign cloud with the existing and legacy infrastructure. So during a while, maybe organization needs to focus on this data sovereignty concept until the market is ready to be prepared to migrate workloads to a pure, let's say, sovereign cloud concept. A best practice, and from advisory and professional services, we are leading, right, with technology partners, this kind of bring out your own key and encrypting the information, right? Bring your own key concept, so you have control on the cryptographic keys. You encrypt the information. Once you have all the information protected, I mean, obviously, you need to have control on where this information is, but at least you have control and you can publish that information right in the target infrastructure. And finally, right, the fourth track that we need to have in this consistent approach to holistic approach to sovereign cloud strategy is what we call sovereign skills. So skills are critical. We need to build skills for the architects, for the implementers, but also for the operations team. What are the two skills that are required for building a proper, let's say, sovereign architecture? Basically, two of them. One could be, we could classify cloud security with a strong knowledge about regulations, local regulations that may apply to these sovereign concept. And the other type of skills that we require are basically infrastructure skills. So at the end, again, we are talking about cloud. So having control on what you are implementing is critical to understand on the native security controls that the infrastructure has is critical. To train the people who is architecting, deploying, and managing this infrastructure, again, is something considered important. So in a nutshell, right, is as a summary, if we want to build a strategy, we need to think on security and risk management as the foundational elements, then to architect accordingly these requirements, a landing architecture for sovereign cloud, considering protecting the data, which is landing, right, and managed by this infrastructure, and building skills on the people, right? This process, people, technology concept together, which is embedded as part of this, let's say, program with these 4 tracks, is what we can, which can help you to define a consistent and holistic program facing with this new transformation. So this is basically, right, my initial introduction presentation. I hope this is good for you to understand what is the idea of the concept behind. Now I would like just to invite Colin that will help us to land right into our HP portfolio, conversation with customers about this emerging topic. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Felix. Welcome to Thursday afternoon. It's not an easy time to make sure everybody's fully awake here, but hey. Quick introduction to me before I start on. I'm a Canadian. In Europe, that seems to be a bit more relevant to state these days, even if we're an American company. Born and raised in Canada, lived in the Netherlands for almost 30 years now. Came up organically through the organization as a technologist, and I'm now a senior distinguished technologist, which is somewhere up in the technical landscape. What I do day to day is I've been doing private or hybrid cloud within the company in the services organization as a worldwide technical lead of a cloud center of excellence for 12, 13 years before I moved to the business unit in the CTO group 4 years ago, where we tackle the problems or the questions that we have from our customers of how do we do this sovereign stuff, and what is our private cloud offering, and how do we adapt to the changing landscape here in Europe. I live in the Netherlands, so my home base is everywhere in Europe, and I see a bunch of familiar faces, but for those that don't know me, that means in practice, for the past 3 to 4 years, I spend the vast majority of my time talking to strategic customers, governments, defense organizations, and agencies, including NATO and several national defense groups here in Europe. And the topics that we've been discussing here today, it's no news to anybody. The geopolitical state of the world has changed the past couple of years, and these have just accelerated these thoughts that we had had before that to become real things that we need to have a solution for. I have, by the way, for those that have ever met me, I really don't like slides. I prefer to talk and listen where I can, but we have a couple slides here to provide a background to some of the topics that I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to just repeat a little one of the topics that Felix had in his slide, where he explained this transition that we've seen. Sovereignty, if you'd asked a few years ago, mostly people were talking about data. Keep the data in my country. How do I make sure the data stays in my country? This was the nature of the discussion that we were having. If you look at the evolution of this discussion, it has changed to technology sovereignty. Now you start to have questions like, what happens if we're embargoed and we don't get updates from a US company? What happens if we are in a war scenario? What happens if the what ifs? I could talk for probably an hour about the what if discussions that I'm having, in particular with government and defense, because it's very much what if, and whatever you fill the blank in with, it ends with things like the internet is cut off at the borders of our country. What if there's war? What if there's embargo, et cetera? And all of these translate to the technical ask and the people part of how do you tackle sovereignty. Thus the third pillar in what Felix was showing of operational sovereignty, because this technology sovereignty quickly evolves to, okay, who's operating it? Where are they? What security clearance do they have if you're talking about military, but certainly what nationality do they have and where are they located in case of emergency? How HPE has tackled this is represented up here. I'm not going to itemize to list them all through, but what I'll explain is how this came to be. So those who don't know, we have had a very clear strategy for providing private cloud solutions for 8 years now. We've been shipping them for 6+ years. Initially, they were connected, and what connected means is we put the solution in your data center, but part of the global control plane, the GreenLake platform, which I'm sure you might have heard around this kind of event, has been sitting in the public cloud. In the summer of 2022, and this is publicly announced as a one contract now for you to go look up, so I can talk a bit about this. Summer of 2022, US Defense DISA organization came to us and basically said, love your private cloud thing, but the fact that your global service layer is up there in the cloud, not so cool, doesn't really work for us. You can imagine in this sovereign context, this is exactly the kind of discussions that we're having here in Europe now. In the summer of 2022, we committed to the US government that we were going to go down the path and we were going to build this as an air-gapped offering. What that means is you bring the global service layer into your secure network boundary. In a defense organization, that's a bunker or the defense network. In a national sovereignty discussion, it means that you're bringing this into a service provider that is in country that you know and love and have been working with for a very long time. And we shift to becoming a technology provider. Specifically, last week there was the third NATO Cloud Conference in Brussels that I was at, and following the Fog and Edge track, we were distilling a lot of the terminology and the lexicon there, and we started to see the terminology coming up there, a cloud technology provider instead of a cloud solution provider or a cloud provider, because it's about providing the technology to enable your chosen in-country, in-bunker, whichever term you want, whatever you define as your sovereign boundary, chosen partner to be the operator of this. And it could be HPE with people in country to provide this for you, but more typically we're seeing the discussion shift towards the service provider or secure partners that you know and have been working with for a very long time, trust, have deeper relationships with in your country or in your region. Technically, how this manifests, and I don't want this to be a talk about all of our products, but I want to talk a little bit about what we have up here. We have generally available now HPE's Private Cloud Enterprise air-gapped solution, which means the complete private cloud solution that we bring into your environment. We have the Alletra as disconnected and can fully be operated within, not connected to the outside world. We have the same for the Networking Central, formerly known as Aruba Central on-prem. That's also available to be deployed within an air-gapped environment. And we have PCAI, or Private Cloud for AI, air-gapped. Now, all of a sudden I started talking about air-gapped, and I'm pretty sure the session said sovereignty. Why would I be doing that? When we solve for the air-gapped use case, which is the most extreme use case, we have, from a technology perspective, back to these 3 pillars, we have solved for sovereign. Because if it can operate when you define your sovereign boundary to be the secure network within your defense environment, it's exactly the same as saying, oh, that sovereign boundary, which is what it's about, is my nation state, or my province or state or Bundesland, or whatever in your country is LAN if we go to Sweden. Whatever you define as your network boundary is ultimately your sovereign boundary when it comes to the technology part. And in each of these cases, the last part of the discussion is who is going to be operating this and what criteria do they need to adhere to. And then you get to national personnel or EU personnel, partner organization or HPE. All of these are basically models and decisions which go along the process to what you have to adhere to from the first slide. If we take the 2 more slides that I have here before I ask Jens to come up and we have a sit and a chat about what they've done here. This is the deep dive into the Private Cloud Enterprise air-gapped and what that means. Essentially, this is a graphical representation for those that prefer to see it and not hear it, to say air-gapped and sovereign are essentially the same thing. It's just from a technology perspective, it's the same thing. Because we've engineered it to operate completely without, and here's the key, without requiring any external internet connectivity to operate. It doesn't mean you can't choose on the tenant network side to say, I still want to connect it to the internet and do useful things for your day-to-day operation. You can choose to do that. We don't require you to have an internet connection in order for this to operate. That's the key in how this has been built. I want to make sure, I'm going to quickly go through this because I want to make sure that Jens and I have time to talk. Private Cloud AI air-gapped. For those that aren't familiar with it, we have a Private Cloud AI solution which is co-engineered together with NVIDIA. We've had this out for some time, I think a year and a half or so that it's been available. And as one can imagine, if you're familiar with the solution, you have things like the NVIDIA Marketplace and things that are typically connecting to outside stuff, and all the AI people that do their AI stuff are used to going in their sandals at their cafe and say, oh, I'll just pull this down from here and pull this down from there. This is now offered in an air-gapped solution as well, which means that we are bringing these things down as part of the NVIDIA Marketplace, as well as the Unified Analytics, HPE open source marketplace in the AI solution. All of this can now be fully operated, also air-gapped. And it's meeting the requirements of our defense customers, but also for other use cases that we're going to talk about here in a second, because I'm going to invite Jens to come up and sit with me for a moment. I think this one is, that's Jens. Hey, Jens.
Hello, Colin.
Hey, you here too?
Hey.
So I will simply give the brief introductions and say, whoa, those are bright lights. Jens is here from Secunet, and as a nice segue to our last slide, is here to explain who he is, but also what, in this sovereign context, why he's made the choice to work with us and what that means in the solution space. Jens, go ahead.
Yes, why I'm here. Secunet has a long story in terms of IT security devices, IT security solutions. And a couple of years ago, also they invest in a public cloud, in a sovereign public cloud. And we are able to provide a sovereign cloud in Germany for companies, for customers. They have a more regulated, more critical workload. And the main topic here is not only to provide a sovereign cloud stack with all this open source technology and something. Also, the important thing is here to run this cloud, so to operate and maintain and lifecycle this cloud. And since 2 years or since 3 years, we started an invention for an air-gapped on-premise cloud for classified workload. So that means restricted workload in terms of secret or other classified layers and levels. So we invented technology, how can we separate tenants in an air-gapped situation so that we provide customers a multi-tenancy cloud stack and can separate tenants via encryption. So, and that was the point where HPE and also NVIDIA came up to Secunet and asked, hey, can we do it together? Can we provide the technology to operate multi-tenancy cloud in an air-gapped situation, also for more restricted workload, not only for sovereign data, sovereign workload. So, and our experience here is not, it's for sure also to providing this encryption layer and this encryption stack underlaying under the infrastructure of HPE. Our main experience is here, how can we operate, how do we operate and lifecycle such a air-gapped cloud environment? Because bringing data, bringing open source packages, CVE patches or something in an air-gapped environment is a big deal. Yeah? So because you have to pass data assessments and something like that. So to just bring data in. The same as bring data out. So it means you, as an admin, as an operation and maintenance engineer, you would like to monitor your cloud. And how do you do this when you have no access to the cloud? So just from the outside. And you cannot sleep in the bunker because sometimes it's not comfortable. Yeah? So how do we do this? And for all that, we provide solutions with our experience here, getting things out, getting things in such a data center, and that's the reason why we are here and talking to each other. So.
Okay, could you maybe say something about, because specifically as far as this, in addition to what secunet is already doing, specifically you've chosen for the PCAI disconnected solution from what I was showing a second ago out of our solution offerings. Could you maybe spend a few words on what was important to you about this solution, that it was addressing the needs that you had?
The first answer is here, how do we separate tenants which are running interference workload on an AI cluster? So how can we do that? So there's an additional requirement here, or additional challenge here, what we have to consider, because we have to scale with the application. So that means we have to consider horizontal scaling and in one tenant environment. So this was the first challenge. And the second challenge is here, how do we operate and lifecycle such a AI-driven environment with all this driver logic from NVIDIA, with all these applications on top from the customer, which the customer brings with him. So that was our challenge here, and we started in the springtime to talk to each other, to work to each other. We have a common project here up and running, and we are in the middle of the integration. So, it will be a lie when I say it's simple. So we have a lot of drawbacks to consider here or to resolve. But we are in a very good shape now. So, and the private cloud AI air-gapped runs in our data center. So it's more than a prototype. It's definitely a feasible and very close to production solution. And also in our integration with our security management system, our security domain management system underneath, works pretty good. And we expect that we have a productive solution in the springtime next year.
Yep.
So this is our I would say feasible approach here.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just add a comment there to this is our experience with multiple other projects that we have. If you're a hyperscaler and you say, we own everything, you come to us, you don't have integration discussions. In all of these solutions, we are bringing them into an existing environment, especially in the secure space. It's, as anybody who's integrated anything in the secure space knows, there's all kinds of teams you need to now interact with to make sure that this is all working. So all of our deployments here, we end up having a lot of open dialogue, and the partnership and the trust factor of let's go figure and tackle this together is incredibly important to make sure that you accelerate all of this. Either in comment to that, but maybe also a slightly different question. Back to the sovereignty topic and the third pillar of the operations part, what were the requirements that you had for operations within these rather strict, secure space? And can you say anything about how we worked through that to come to the solution from the operations perspective?
So first of all, resilience is a main topic. So to be resilient against failures, and also to have disaster recovery strategies in place, also in an air-gapped situation. And they mostly should be automated so that they not only run with the human impact, so they have to run automated completely. The next hard criteria is security. So how secure is the software stack himself? How secure is the delivery? So it means all the CI/CD pipelines, all the internal air-gapped repositories. So that's what we have really to consider here. And for every patch what you bring in your air-gapped data center, you have to check it out. How secure is it? And believe me, testing of such things are not easy. All the legal compliancy here is very related to the local conditions in each individual country. So also that partly we have to consider. So
yeah, absolutely.
For it, there is not a global specification available. Yeah, so just we have to consider the local individual agreements between industry and government. Sticking on data sovereignty is clear in mind that data in rest and data in flight has to be encrypted. So it's a fact, and I guess today we shouldn't talk about it. But data transparency and data sovereignty means also to have a transparency in terms of processing this data. So providing customer functional-wise an insight. How do we process data? This is really important. And a good evidence for such things is logging. Logging of events, logging of misbehavior, also of changes in the environment, and that can give the customer a good insight how the customer data are processed inside such a cloud stack. Is that an answer for you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think I'm going to add a comment from my own experience with especially the regulatory requirements. As you saw in one of Felix's first slides, every country has a different interpretation or flavor of this. So there is no single standard is an interesting landscape for us to work in, because we're trying to bring a solution which is standardized for everyone. What we find is each time that we go through this, as we've done with the DISA private cloud, and as we've gone through with you, and as we go through each of these, I'm going to say unique combination of which of our private cloud offerings, which country, which regulations we need to adhere to. What we see is there is commonality across all of these things. There's commonality between the impact level requirements of the US. There's essentially the STIG hardening, or the standards that Germany requires versus the standards that NATO requires versus the standards that pick a random country in Europe requires. Each time that we go through this, what we are finding is that more and more of the things for that country's regulation have been solved already, because we've done it through one of the other certifications that we've gotten. We typically then have to start in each country where we do this solution first and say, no, we can't say up front, we've solved all of that. We can only say we've solved all of these already, many of which will apply to your country, and together we will go through and tackle the compliancy and the accreditation often, which comes associated with that, to be able to demonstrate that out to the authorities.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably close to wrap. Is there any thoughts that you would like to share with the group here as your final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Just I take the ball from you.
Of course.
In Europe, we have not a common standard or a common agreement, but it is very likely that countries follow other countries when they pass a certain kind of certification. So in Germany, for instance, we have this Federal Institute for IT Security, and all these these requirements which coming from that institute, they are really high, they're really challenging. And when we talk about defense and companies which are working for defense activities, they are relying on that decision from the Federal Institute of IT Security. Mm-hmm. So they have an own certification body for sure, but they are talk to each other, they're relying on it. And when you have this certificate for NATO approval or from NATO permission, mm-hmm. then it is more simple to provide a private cloud AI air-gapped, for instance, in France or in Spain or in Italy. So just because you can convince the people with your security targets what you achieved already.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I see we're actually at time, so I'm going to thank you for coming up.
Thank you, Colin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And I have one more slide that I'm going to spend 30 seconds on, just so you understand it's there. We have confidential computing is a bit of a topic in this space. Jens highlighted correctly that you expect by default encryption in transit and encryption when it's stored at rest. We've seen more and more in these discussions encryption in use. So encrypting it, trusted execution environments and confidential computing, encrypting it while it's being processed in the CPU and memory. We have done a lot of work in our labs organization for this, and we have a stand out there with our labs folks who have done most of this work. If you want to take a look at this, it's not there today. It's there, but it's not productized and ready to be consumed. That's the little asterisk you see on the slide. But just know that it is work in progress that we expect to start to show up in these sovereign discussions over the course of the next couple of years. So my summary for this would be, and there's a nice slide for that, we have these standards. We break it up into this transition of data sovereignty has shifted to technology sovereignty and now operational as an important part of the discussion, and that's the nature of every discussion that we're having at the moment. You have here for follow-ups if you want to from the QR codes, and I will be here at the back and kicked out when they kick me out if you want to follow up with me with any questions, and I'm sure the same would apply to Jens or Felix. Thank you very much for your time.